Anti-realism. What does that mean? Well, you've come to the right place because I know exactly what that means, and I can tell you that information in a timely manner in which you can still comprehend and understand the information while also not wasting an hour of your time. But why does anti-realism... The reason why anti-realism is so important is because it allows full creative expression without any limitations by rules of reality. This allows for any story and any setting to be told, no matter what circumstances, no matter how bizarre. And it allows us to create stories and characters and settings that could not be created by just normal people in front of a camera acting. The question we're kind of looking at right now is, what is the significance of anti-realism for acting in theatre? Well, for me personally, I find that the best way to understand a question and to answer a question, you first need to go through the history of the subject you're talking about. And the history of anti-realism is quite deep. There's a lot there, so here are the things that I found that are, essential to understanding anti-realism and its influence and why it's so impactful and why I personally love it so much and why it's one of my favorite methods of acting and performing. And obviously you can't talk about history without mentioning the wars of the 20th century, such as the Great War. You might not think that it would have much impact on theatre, but it created, firstly, new stories to be told, of heroism and bravery, but it also showed the collapse of empires and the crumbling of European economies. This is kind of where you started to see anti-realism pop up because people wanted an escape from the reality. Now, obviously, around this time we had the Industrial Revolution, which was very significant, but something I would find more significant to theatre at the time is Sigmund Freud. Sigmund Freud, born 1856, passed in 1939, was a pioneer of many things such as psychoanalysis, free association, dream analysis, famous for the Oedipus complex, which, if you don't know about, and also hypnosis. And why I mention this is because around this time realism becomes less important to playwrights. Playwrights wanted a new way of expressing stories and to tell stories, and they didn't want to look at the bleak current situation they were going through. They wanted to escape. So this is where anti-realism begins, and you can put it into a lot of subgenres. It's a very blanket term, and probably the most prevalent in my opinion, and that is surrealism. A great example of experiencing things through the mind of a dreamer is Alice in Wonderland. Alice is, in this normal world, and then she goes through this rabbit hole into this fantastical world, and it turns out it was all a dream. Using a dream can really allow you to be as crazy as possible. Another example is The Wizard of Oz, which came out in the early 20th century. Dorothy, the main character, a tornado comes in real life. She hits her head and goes into a dream full of these crazy characters who are only available in our imagination and only can be created in our imagination. And that's kind of what surrealism is. If you wanted to look away from films and more at playwrights and theatre performances, Simon Stevens is a great example. His play Three Kingdoms, which is a fantastic work of surrealism. Now, Three Kingdoms is about a detective who's trying to shut down this trafficking ring all throughout Europe. However, due to a lack of sleep, he goes into a fever dream, and trying to figure out the truth, he can no longer distinguish the truth from his subconscious. So the term of dream, it allows for the subconscious to take over and kind of just fantastical things to happen that wouldn't normally happen in real life. Now, another aspect of anti-realism is expressionism. So the main character in expressionist plays acts normally to the surroundings, living truthfully under imaginary circumstances. But the side characters do not. They act how the main character sees them. For example, if the main character dislike or have a hatred for a certain character in the play, then that person will act like that. They'll act exaggerated, like they are the worst person possible. To us, the viewer, the side characters are acting bombastically and just completely nuts. Expressionism is of German origin. It's dark and bleak in nature, but it reflected The outlook of many Germans during that time, obviously with the loss of 2 wars, Germany was in economic crisis. Expressionism reflects that. Obviously, and also with the changing of times and technologies that came with the Industrial Revolution, playwrights depicted a future that was sad and apocalyptic, almost as it was a dystopia. You got many stories like Man vs. Machine, and a great example of Man vs. Machine, and also Expressionism, is Fritz Lang's Metropolis, where there's robots. The first very depiction of robots was in Metropolis, and it tells of the robots taking over a bleak and dark future for the humans. Moving swiftly on from that very light-hearted and playful example of anti-realism, we move on to absurdism. Absurdism rejects logic and the rules of cause and effect. Things happen for no reason. But it was made to laugh at real-world absurdisms, such as war and poverty. However, absurdism is only absurd to the audience that's watching, but for the actors, the absurdism happening in the play, it's treated as it's normal. Like, it doesn't affect them. It's just, it happens. And that's just how it is. A good example of this is Samuel Beckett with his play Happy Days, which was premiered in 1961. In Happy Days, the main character is halfway buried in trash for most of the play and can only really move with their upper body. They don't talk about it as if this is crazy. And they don't even really talk about it because to them it's commonplace. Why would you talk about something that's normal? Now, Samuel Beckett is a absurd man himself. Originally born in Ireland and raised to be Irish, he wrote almost all of his plays in French. However, he wasn't fully fluent, so it's essentially like me saying I have a head of hair, which is technically true, but kind of dishonest. So that's your basic crash course on anti-realism and the different subgenres in it. Now, I would like to discuss the significance and impact on acting, how that affects theatre and acting today, obviously, and also just other mediums that use anti-realism. I suppose the way I look at it, anti-realism allowed for us to escape our reality, to make fun of our own reality in a way, and just to not take things so seriously. In a world that was so grim and bleak in the 20th century, they just needed a way to escape that and find an outlet, creatively speaking, to kind of play around and just express creativity and to let their dreams and mind just run wild. Without anti-realism, we wouldn't have some of the biggest movie franchises and plays of all time, different places and faraway galaxies, that wouldn't exist without anti-realism. When things don't have rules, you can make the rules. You can say what goes and what doesn't. You're not bound by reality. Whatever comes to mind, that can be your character, your setting, your story, your plot. When it comes down to it, acting is playing. If you're gonna limit yourself to being realistic, what's the point? I just feel like you can't fully express yourself and show how your uniqueness is different from everyone else. Without that, I think we would live in a very bleak and dark world still. That's about all I got, really. There's lots more. There's always more. But I think that's what's most important and the biggest takeaways from anti-realism. So my closing remarks, just don't be so serious. Have fun, play, use your imagination. Be creative, be unique, be you, because there's only one of you. I know, really inspiring.